South Jersey's home for the Sixers and Flyers.
Yeah!
He scores!
A two-hand jam!
97.3 ESPN, WENJ, WENJ HD, Millville, Atlantic City, a Town Square media station. This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Black Kia Studios.
What a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Hanging out with you on a Tuesday night, the night before Game 2 of the Sixers-Wizards. Of course, you can hear all the action right here on 97.3 ESPN. We will bridge the gap for you with Bryan Toporek from the NBA podcast will join us coming up at 6:20 tonight to get more into what happened in Game 1, what to expect from Game 2 for the Sixers, and as well look around the NBA playoffs. As last night, we saw two teams get completely busted up last night. The Nuggets just took it to the Blazers, and the Miami Heat got kicked to the ground. They wouldn't let them back up in the Bucks game. So it seems very apparent that at least for one night, two teams just did not have it at all. So we got a lot of NBA playoff action to get to as well. Plus, we'll talk some Eagles and NFL as well. As always, we take your thoughts as well throughout the show. 609-403-0973 is the text board for those of you listening on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Also, we got all of you watching on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, where you can say hello to us, chime in on the stream. We got a lot of interaction yesterday on the Eagles Julio Jones front. So if you want to comment as well, you can get on the conversation right there as you watch the show on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter as well. But I wanted to start the show. We try to kind of mix things up, and I can't let this go. All right. And, if this is a, listen, I can be spiteful. All right. I'm Italian. I'm flawed. I'm not perfect. All right. So when I was tweeted at last night, was I a little triggered? Yeah, probably. So it's not to excuse anything, but I'm willing to admit it. There was there's a part of me looking around. I was like, all right, I can't take this anymore. So someone tweeted me on Twitter basically saying that Joe Girardi lost the Phillies. And they asked Charlie Manuel to manage the rest of the season. And I'm having trouble getting on this bandwagon with the Philadelphia sport fan or any sport fan. All right. It's not Philadelphia sports, it's any sport that wants to blame the manager or the coach or whoever it is for everything. Everything. They never want to blame the players. They never want to criticize the actual athletes on the field. At some point, the player has to make decisions on their own. It cannot always be on the manager. But yet people look at that Marlins game last night and are actually adding me on Twitter, along with our Phillies insider Frank Close, and complaining about Girardi. Why does Girardi and Gabe Kapler and Pete Mackanin and Ryan Sandberg, why are all these managers stink? But we always have to go back to Charlie Manuel. We always got to go back to the last guy that we liked. Remember for years, Sixer fans were like, you got to rehire Larry Brown. You should never let Larry Brown leave this team. Or for Eagle fans, it was, well, this would have never happened under Buddy Ryan in the 90s, right? Or for a while there, for Flyer fans, it was, well, fill in the blank coach, whoever it might have been at that moment, because Flyers had so many coaches. Fill in the blank coach would have never done this. Laviolette would have never done this, right? For example. And I don't understand this desire to always look backwards when it comes to sports fans. There's a lot of things I understand, but I'm a logic-based individual. And for me, when I watch a sporting event, there has never been a moment in my life where I was going to nitpick or double down on the manager or the coach being fired for something the players did. If you watch the game, there's no point in time where I would ever say I'm blaming Brett Brown for Ben Simmons committing a turnover, or I'm going to blame Joe Girardi for Brandon Kinsler giving up a home run, or I'm going to blame Doug Peterson then and Nick Sirianni now for the quarterback throwing an interception. I will never do that, and I will never accept that way of thinking, because what you're doing is you're taking responsibility away from the person who actually did the bad job. You know, if I worked at a fast food place and I make someone's food incorrectly, or I don't cook the meat thoroughly enough, or I use bad lettuce that's going, rotten, I'm the one who should be in trouble, not my manager, not the general manager of the cluster of fast food places. If you go out to your local establishment and you order an alcoholic drink, let's say you order a beer and they don't bring you a beer, they bring you a vodka. Are you going to blame the owner of the business for your server getting your order wrong? That we have with not blaming the player for what they did wrong. I don't get it. I don't understand it. I don't comprehend it. I don't understand why in the real world, if your waiter gets your order wrong or the cook cooks your food bad, why would it be the manager's fault of the business? So why are we blaming Joe Girardi? Why are we blaming the head coach when the player doesn't do something right? To me, that's irrational. To me, you have to look at the players and hold them accountable for their actions. We are so obsessed with wanting to hire and fire coaches. To me, it's completely irrational. And I can't accept that way of thinking. That's why I had to tweet what I did last night. Because if your instinct is to blame the coach or blame the manager every time somebody does something wrong, then either you've never played sports in your life, or you just look at the sport and want somebody to blame because you're too much of a wimp to actually blame the players. Because the last time I checked, it's the players who play the game. It's the players who get on the court and have to execute. There's no way that you would go to your local establishment and if you order a beer and they bring you a vodka, that you are going to blame the owner of the business. No, it's the person who got your order wrong. is responsible for that mistake. So then why would you blame Joe Girardi for the Phillies losing last night? I'll tell you why the Phillies lost last night, because the Phillies are a mediocre baseball team with a handful of good players and two players who are arguably very good at what they do. Zach Wheeler, you could argue, is the best pitcher on the staff, and JT Realmuto is the best hitting catcher in baseball. Bryce Harper has a ton of talent. Aaron Nola has a ton of talent. Gene Segura is a good player. But we got to stop acting like these players and these teams are better than they really are. Listen, if you want to be a fan and say, I believe my team is better than they are, cool, man, enjoy it. Root for your team. Believe in your team. Buy that jersey. Get on board. Let's go. But you know what? When your favorite player makes a mistake, or when your favorite player strikes out, or when your favorite player has a turnover, don't be the idiot who blames the manager or the head coach, because you're completely irrational, you're intellectually dishonest, and realistically, you sound like you never ever watched or played a sport in your life. Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can watch the show on 97.3 ESPN. Text board is open for all of you out there as well as 609-403-0973. We'll get more into the Sixers and the NBA coming up next with Bryan Toporek from the NBA podcast. I want to remind my friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook, the NBA playoffs are underway right now, and FanDuel is celebrating by hooking you up, all new users, with $100. Just bet $1 on either the Clippers or the Mavs tonight. And you can do these bets from now until May 30th on the Clippers and Mavs series. And FanDuel will give you $100 in site credit, even if your bet doesn't win. You heard that right. New users get $100 of either the Clippers or the Mavericks from now until May 30th. And FanDuel will give you $100 even if your bet doesn't win. And that's because FanDuel is America's #1 sports book with their simple-to-use app. Plus, they have different deposit options, so know your dollars are safe. And when you win, FanDuel Sportsbook can give you your winnings safely in as little as 24 hours. So download the FanDuel Sportsbook app, sign up with my promo code Hennig to turn your $100 into a big-time payday. That's promo code Hennig exclusively on FanDuel Sportsbook. Must be 21 or older to play and present in New Jersey. Site credit is non-withdrawable and expires in 7 days after receipt. First bet only. Offer is non-transferable. Terms and restrictions apply. See full terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Of course, don't forget, we are also in the Matt Black Kia studios here on 97.3 ESPN. Matt Black Kia, that will get you approved today. Matt Black Kia, Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township. Visit them online at mattblackkia.com. Now, before we hit the break, I want to play you something that was said by Michael Lee just about maybe 30 minutes ago on the Sports Bash with Mike Gill here on 97.3 ESPN. And I want you to chew on this point before we get to Bryan Toporek, because I thought that was an excellent explanation of Ben Simmons and Tobias Harris's role with the 76ers. A little something for you to chew on as we go into the break before we ask Bryan Toporek about this point from Mr. Michael Lee just 30 minutes ago on the Sports Bash.
We're not looking to Ben to score. We're not going to ask Ben to be a scorer. He doesn't want to be a scorer. He wants to be a defensive player. He wants to be an assist man. He wants to do all the other things to fill the stat sheet. So we need somebody on this team who can go out there and get a bucket for us. Tobias, do it. Can you do it?
Right.
And Tobias has wanted to do it. He's wanted to be in this position. And he's got a coach that he trusts, that he already has a prior relationship with, who understands him, who knows him, and can come up with a scheme that's going to bring out the best in him. And you see that. You see that Tobias is playing with the confidence because he knows that he's got a coach that knows who he is, that knows what he can bring to the table, and it wants to, elevate him and accentuate all those talents.
Ben doesn't want to score. Tobias, can you do it? And Tobias said yes. And by the way, without Tobias Harris, you don't win game 1 on Sunday. All right? If that was Al Horford out there, or that was Dario Saric out there, or whoever you want to fill in the blank with. If that was somebody else on Sunday, you don't win that game. Jimmy Butler shot, what was it, 4 for 18 or whatever in that game one for the Heat, and he shot just as poorly last night as well. I can't even promise you Jimmy Butler would have gotten you the points, the 37, that Tobias got you the other night. Interesting thing to think about Tobias Harris and Ben Simmons' roles with the Sixers as we get ready to talk with Bryan Toporek coming up next right here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM. The 97.3 ESPN mobile app is free thanks to First Bank of Seattle City, and we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, where you can watch the show right here on 97.3 ESPN. The Sports Bash with Mike Gill, Monday through Friday. Game Night with Josh Hennig as well.
The NBA playoffs continue. Giannis and the Bucks protect home court, taking games 1 and 2 in Milwaukee.
Here comes showtime. Antetokounmpo with the hammer.
Now the series heads to Miami. Can Jimmy Butler and the Heat respond with a win at home?
Now Butler nearly lost the ball, gets it back, spins, shoots, and hits.
Or will the Bucks keep on rolling?
The NBA playoffs, Game 3, Thursday night, exclusively on 97.3 ESPN FM. Coverage begins at 7 p.m.
You asked for it. You got it. Fast Track Checkout at either Matt Blatt Kia location. Buy it your way. Complete your purchase online or have us deliver it. Purchase any new or pre-owned vehicle from Matt Blatt Kia in Egg Harbor Township or Toms River with 0 money down and 0% APR financing for 60 months on every 2021 Kia Soul, Sportage, or Forte. Plus, we need your trade, even if you owe thousands more than it's worth. So get out of that old car you hate with 0 down payment and 0% APR financing available for up to 60 months. Try Fast Track Checkout. Purchase completely online and have us deliver right to your home or office. Only at Matt Blatt Kia, where you can't make a mistake with our 4-day love it or leave it return policy.
It's gotta be a Matt Blatt Kia.
Offers with approved Tier 1 or 2 credit through Kia Motors Finance. Not all will qualify. 0% based on 1667 per 1,000 borrowed. Negative equity financed into new loan. Go to mattblattkianj.com for complete details. Expires 5/31/2021. Matt Blatt Kia, 6211 Black Horse Pike.
Levels exclude score bet with GM financing. Excludes prior sales. See dealer for details.
Many car dealers all around the area are having trouble getting inventory, so they're jacking up prices big time. But at Bennett Chevy, we haven't changed a thing. Why would we? You said you love our GM supplier employee pricing. You pay what our supplier employees pay, not a penny more. Bennett also gives you all the rebates, which can add up to a whopping 25% off MSRP. Plus, Bennett's got available 0% financing that'll save you thousands more. Looking for used? Good news. Bennett's still paying a minimum $7,000 for any trade you bring us, regardless of condition or miles. Any old Heath is worth a minimum $7,000 towards any pre-owned in stock. And our non-commissioned sales staff is paid on your satisfaction, not how much you spend, so there's no pressure ever. And Bennett Chevy is now an authorized lease return center for all brands. So now more than ever, there's just no beating Bennett. Find new roads at Bennett Chevrolet, Egg Harbor Township, and BennettChevy.com.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM, 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea City. And we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. We can watch the show, of course, right here. Just follow 97.3 ESPN. We'll get to all your thoughts and comments as we always do each and every night, coming up a little bit later this hour. Of course, if you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, you can comment on the stream just under the caption below. Or if you're listening on 97.3 ESPN FM, you can comment at 609-403-0973 is textable. But right now, it's on is giving you a little bit of glitch. All right, we should have it back now. All right, I should have you now, Brian. How you doing?
Doing well, Josh. How are you?
That was me, not you. So there you
okay. Yeah, I was gonna say you froze there for a couple seconds, but yeah, we're good to go now.
I froze, you did not. So there you go.
Cool. All good.
The beauty of technology. So obviously we are the day before game 2, and I still contend that my biggest takeaway from game 1 was Tobias Harris. Because without him, they don't win that game to me. Because Joel Embiid gets the fouls early. Ben Simmons, he's getting his assists. He's finding guys. But early on, those guys were not hitting threes. They were cold as ice shooting. And listen, if that was Al Horford, if that was Dario Saric, if that was Josh Richardson, heck, Jimmy Butler had, 4 field goals in game 1 for the Heat? So if that was probably anybody else, they're not getting 37 points, Brian, but Tobias did.
Yeah, I mean, I tweeted this going into the series. Like, as soon as the Wizards clinched that 8th seed, obviously the matchup of Joel Embiid versus the Wizards center is the one you're going to pick on because they don't really have a good answer for him. But I also noticed, they don't have a good answer for Tobias Harris. And it seems like Doc and Tobias noticed that as well. They're just lacking that sort of front court depth in terms of the 3-4 slot. I mean, I like Rui Hachimura. I think he's going to be a really good player. He doesn't have chance to stop Tobias Harris in this series. So, I know they talked after the game, they're asking the Wizards players, what do you do? Because you also have to worry about stopping Embiid. And they were like, look, we don't have a good answer here. If we devote more resources to stopping Tobias, then Joel Embiid's going to eat. So it's just the Sixers have a ton of talent, and the Wizards are, kind of left drawing straws at this point of who's going to have to take that Tobias matchup.
When you think about also the reality that for an organization like the Sixers, this is what you built. You built a roster that is going to have Ben Simmons passing the shooters and Joel Embiid working the inside-outside game. And then Tobias Harris has to step up. And, on one hand, yes, you give credit for Morey and Rivers, Morey for building the roster this way and for Rivers for realizing what to do. But you also got to give Tobias credit for being willing to take up this responsibility, because when Joel Embiid went out with those fouls, I think me and every other person watching the game was like, this game could get ugly. And it didn't. It got it got dicey, but it didn't get away from them.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Tobias has been doing this all year, really, to his credit. This is not just a fluke thing where, he comes out of nowhere to score 37. I mean, that is his career high with the Sixers. So to some extent it was, but this has been the version of Tobias Harris we've been getting all year, attacking mismatches when he knows he has them. So, I think honestly, it came as a surprise to the extent that he was as successful as he was, but I think this is what we've seen out of Tobias all year.
Brian, we actually lost you again on my end, so if you could take it up from the top there. I just did a little reset there for the audience so they can be all good with us for us here.
For sure. Yeah, I was just saying, this is the version of Tobias Harris we've seen all year. This is not necessarily a surprise. He's been attacking mismatches, and in this series, I think he's going to have a lot more success than he might later on down the road in the playoffs. I think, especially if you look ahead to a potential Eastern Conference Finals matchup against Brooklyn or Milwaukee, they have better answers than the Wizards do this series. And honestly, even the Hawks and the Knicks will in the next series. So I think hopefully we'll see this version of Tobias for the next 2 rounds at least, and then we'll go from there. But yeah, I mean, I think you said it well. It's a testament to Morey to, realizing he's best at the 4. He was forced to play more small forward with Horford and Embiid there last year. Doc, I think when Doc came in, this was the hope that the version that we saw with Doc, with the Clippers a couple years ago, the version that got the Sixers to trade for Tobias in the first place, that Doc could get him back to that. And, it was a big focus of Doc all year. It was coming into the year. He said, you just need to be a quick decision player. You need to go to the spots that you're comfortable with. Tobias is doing that. And he's been doing it all season. So it's hats off to him, man. Because I was one of probably the loudest critics when he signed that $180 million contract a couple years ago. And if he keeps playing like this, especially in the playoffs, I'm going to have egg all over my face and I'm going to like it.
Bryan Toporek joining us here on the Boardwalk on a hotline here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. He is the co-host of the NBA podcast, contributor for Forbes Sports. You can follow him on Twitter at @Toporek on Twitter. Brian, overall big picture, obviously most people believe the Sixers are going to beat the Wizards. I think there may be a handful of what would you call them? Wizard Sands who are just Wizards, Russell Westbrook. But most people believe that the Sixers are the better team. But how much of a better team are they than the Wizards? I think some people are starting to wonder, is the gap maybe a little smaller between the Wizards and the Sixers than previously thought?
I don't think so. I think game 1 was kind of an anomaly with Embiid getting into foul trouble. And, he played 10 minutes in the first half. If he continues to get into foul trouble early, then yes, this series will be closer than anyone expected. But it played out largely as anticipated. Like Tobias took advantage when Embiid was out in the first half. Embiid completely dominated in the second half, 30 points in 30 minutes, got all of the Wizards centers into foul trouble. So Bradley Beal is a great player, and we saw bad Russell Westbrook in game 1. If good Russ shows up in game 2, maybe it is close again, but I don't think the Sixers have any real cause for concern in this series.
Now, moving forward, what do you think their concern should be? Because for me, first of all, I'm an anti-Nets guy. I'm on the record this for 2 months, 3 months now. I haven't seen them together for more than 9 games now. I don't know if soft tissue injuries are going to creep up. Soft tissue injuries, we see them in other sports. They're an issue. Hamstring, Durant, Harden. These are athletes. Something could happen. What if Kyrie decides that something in the outside world is more of an interest to him than basketball in the middle of a series? I don't know. So I just can't believe in the Nets. Oh, and by the way, Steve Nash has never coached a playoff game before Saturday night in his life. So I can't believe in the Nets. I don't know what to do with the Bucks because the 2-time MVP has never been to the NBA Finals, and Budenholzer has been a 1 seed 3 times, never done anything with it. So, I mean, I understand there's competition out there, but it's not like I'm pounding the table for the other teams as well. So where do the Sixers stack up in an Eastern Conference of a bunch of people who are completely unproven outside of the Heat? And I think after last night, everybody's expecting the Heat to go out and win that series anytime soon.
Yeah, I think the Heat are done for. I mean, look, we've said all year it's a 3-team conference between the Bucks, Nets, and the Sixers. That's what made clinching the number 1 seed so important because, I know a lot of people are saying the Sixers have a cakewalk to the Eastern Conference Finals. We'll see who ends up winning that Knicks-Hawks series. I think the Hawks in particular could throw some tricky matchups at the Sixers. I think the Sixers will still be favored, but I don't think it's going to be a sweep or anything like that. But having seen especially what the Bucks did last night to the Heat, and I hear your concerns about the Nets, but I just think having 3 high-level individual creators like Kevin Durant, James Harden, Kyrie Irving, guys who can stem, if a team goes on a 10-0 run against them, you can stem those types of like avalanches, like what we saw against the Heat last night from the Bucks. So I think, honestly, 3 days into the playoffs, seeing the Lakers lose their first game, seeing the Clippers lose their first game, seeing Utah lose their first game, I think the winner of Bucks Nets in the next round should be considered the prohibitive favorite to win the title. That isn't to say that the Sixers don't stand a chance against them, but I think if we do get Sixers versus Bucks or Sixers versus Nets in the Eastern Conference Finals, I don't think the Sixers will be favored in that series.
No, I agree with you. I don't think they will be favored either. I just feel like and correct me if I'm wrong, because you cover the whole league, okay?
Mm-hmm.
You watch the whole league. You talk about on the NBA podcast, you and Mort. I feel like sometimes that there's an infatuation with star players.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people forget that it doesn't matter how much talent you have. It's the rest of the team around them. Jordan still passed it to Paxson. Robert Horry still hit those big threes. It's the other guys on the team that make it up the holes when the stars don't work out. And I just feel like that the Sixers have a better supporting cast than the Nets. And I just have questions about the Bucks supporting cast because I like Chris Middleton a lot, but I don't know if he can do what he did in game 1 every single night that Giannis might have a rough night.
Yeah, I think ultimately the playoffs all come down to individual matchups, and I think both the Nets and the Bucks pose more matchup problems for the Sixers than vice versa. I mean, Embiid against the Nets, they have no good answer for him. Totally hear that. But the Sixers also don't have a great answer for Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden in total. You can throw Ben Simmons on one, Danny Green on one, Matisse Thybulle on one, but Thybulle isn't going to start game 1 most likely. So, you're probably just giving a game right away because whoever Seth Curry is on, they're going to relentlessly target. Same deal with the Bucks. Giannis, Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday. You can throw those 3 guys at Ben, Tobias, and Joel, and again, they're going to target Seth Curry. They might target Danny, who has been really good defensively in some aspects, but not all aspects. So I think, the concern with the Sixers is, can their offense keep up against an elite defense? Their defense was second in the league during the regular season. Their offense, I think, finished 13th, especially in the half court. I believe it was 18th. So, can they manufacture points beyond just give the ball to Joel and hope he hits a ton of mid-range shots, which he's been doing all year? Maybe he is just able to do that. And maybe Tobias keeps doing what he does in game 1, and we get, Ben Simmons keeps facilitating. We get a ton of threes from Danny and Seth and George Hill, and Furkan comes alive. Like, I'm definitely not saying the Sixers can't win the title this year. I think they are one of, probably 5 or 6 teams that entered the playoffs with legitimate title aspirations. But I do worry, just looking ahead to a hypothetical matchup, assuming both teams are healthy. I think the Nets and the Bucks both pose some serious matchup problems for the Sixers.
Bryan Toporek here, co-host of the NBA podcast here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN at Toporek on Twitter, also a contributor for Forbes Sports. Bryan, let's flip it over to the Western Conference. I'm curious about what we're going to see tonight because this Lakers-Suns game, to me, is extremely fascinating. Not that the Mavs-Clippers isn't, but I'm just starting with that one. I don't know what I'm going to get from this game because I keep being told that LeBron James is LeBron James and Anthony Davis is Anthony Davis. Are 2 of the top 10 players on the planet right now. But yet what I saw from them in game 1 was an Anthony Davis that was just disinterested in doing much of anything, and LeBron James, who seemed to put more effort into his injury that he suffered late in the game. They did half the game. So what on earth is this Lakers team at this point going against the Suns?
Yeah, I mean, for one, the Suns are just a great team. So if the Lakers end up losing to the Suns, I know Vegas odds makers favor the Lakers going into the series, but that wasn't necessarily an indictment of the Suns. It's just you're betting on LeBron James and Anthony Davis. But it's pretty clear that neither guy is 100% healthy. Both of them had long-term injuries. We heard rumblings late in the season that LeBron was being rushed back just to make sure he was ready to play game one. So I don't think those guys are fully healthy. I don't know if we're going to see a fully healthy version of LeBron and Anthony Davis in the playoffs. And I think that's a big problem, especially for AD, because it's been clear, dating back to last season, the best version of the Lakers is with Anthony Davis at center. When you mess around and put Andre Drummond next to him, Anthony Davis is not nearly as effective. So AD needs to play more 5, but I can understand it, especially if he's coming off that injury, doesn't feel 100%. If he doesn't want to bang in the post with DeAndre Ayton all game, who's got the physicality to give him some real problems. So it's a great question. I guess the one thing to hang your hat on from the Lakers' perspective is they are the lower seed. So if they go down 2-0, they're going back home. It's not like they lost home court advantage. If the Clippers go down 2-0, it's a lot more concerning. But from the Suns, too, we don't know what shape Chris Paul is going to be in. He hurts that shoulder in the second quarter in game one and, came back, but did not look like the version of Chris Paul that we know. His handle was a lot looser. He seemed reluctant to pull jumpers. He says he's playing, but, how healthy is he? And is he the Chris Paul that we saw this year who should be in contention for the All-NBA team?
Now, the Mavs-Clippers game tonight, I'm also interested because there's a part of me that says if Kawhi Leonard comes out there and dominates the game, the Clippers win. But I ask you, Bryan, is Kawhi that kind of guy? Like, is Kawhi the guy that's going to say, give me the ball and get out of my way? I'm just going to take over this game because I just don't know. Is that really his personality?
Yeah, throughout that Raptors title run, he certainly was. I'm sure Sixers fans have some bad memories from that a couple of years ago, so we won't go too far into it. But yeah, it's a fair question. Like, how does he balance being deferential and going into takeover mode himself, especially when you've got another guy in Paul George who you also need, he played well in the second half, did not play well in the first half. I think from the Clippers' perspective, the big question is how do you contain Luka Doncic? Because they did not have a good answer for him in game one. He was forcing switches early, just dominated when he could do that and got loose against Zubac, started pulling a ton of jumpers and hitting them. So they started sending double teams at him and trapping him and blitzing him in the second half. And that didn't work either because he's a great passer. And he started passing to Dorian Finney-Smith and Tim Hardaway Jr. And those guys started hitting shots. So, if I'm the Clippers, I don't think I'm switching on Luka. I have Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, both of whom you could argue are top 5 perimeter defenders, at least in the Western Conference, if not the NBA. Those guys should be taking that responsibility. There is no reason that you should have Zubac ever switching on to Luka Doncic or Pat Bev, who I love, but he's given up a ton of size to Luka. The Marcus Morris, none of those guys should be taking Luka Doncic. Use your 2 best perimeter defenders on their best player and just live with the results.
Now, speaking of results, we have limited results so far of the playoffs, only a couple days in, but I feel like the Western Conference, do we really have a favorite? Like, I feel like it's the Clippers are what if, the Lakers are what if, the Utah, is Donovan Mitchell going to play anytime soon? I think that's a lot of that. And I'm out on the Nuggets. I feel like the Nuggets are just, they survive Portland, they're not surviving anything else. And the Suns, the Suns might be the favorite at this point. I don't even know anymore. If Portland beats the Nuggets, are they the favorite? I have no idea with the West. I feel like the West, I can't remember a time of a conference being this wide open with so many questions.
Yeah, you can make a case for pretty much every team in the West, and you can also make a case against pretty much every team in the West. So it does feel completely wide open at this point. It's only one game so far for most of these teams, so I don't want to overreact too much. I agree with you. Denver is probably drawing dead with the Jamal Murray injury, which is a bummer because I think they would have been in legitimate contention, especially after the Aaron Gordon trade. Otherwise, I think if the Lakers were fully healthy, I would still pick them to win, but I just don't know that they're going to be fully healthy. And the Suns, you're right, based on game one, the Suns probably would be the favorite. But again, what shape is Chris Paul in moving forward, and can he stay healthy for a full playoff run? Utah, it does sound like Donovan Mitchell is going to play game two, but he's been out now for a month with this ankle injury that was so bad that, the medical staff told him not to play in game one. So what version of Donovan Mitchell do we see? I have no idea who's going to come out of the West, but whichever team does will certainly be battle tested.
Well, battle tested or worn down, which value at this point. You opened that door right up for me there. Put it on a tee. I got to ask, which is more valuable? Is it being battle tested or being beat up? Like, the whole point of the Sixers getting the number one seed is, well, you avoided the Nets and the Bucks in the second round, right? You're going to be fresher. Your path to the finals is better. Well, in the Western Conference, is one of these teams going to maybe get to the conference finals and maybe have a little bit easier path to get to the NBA finals, and maybe they'll be a favorite? I don't really know if there's a right answer to that, though.
Yeah, it's just going to depend on what shape they're in come early July. Because, right now, I don't think you can have a ton of confidence in the Lakers if you're only going to get 80% of LeBron James moving forward and 75% of Anthony Davis, or whatever the percentages are going to be. Same deal with the Suns, same deal with the Jazz. It's a fair question for sure. And you're right. It's for the Sixers, this is the time to take advantage. Like, they need to see what the Bucks did to the Heat last night and come out with that same type of energy against the Wizards in game two. Because if they let the Wizards hang around and Embiid has to play 35 plus minutes against a team he shouldn't have to play 35 plus minutes against, that's where you start to run into, does he get fatigued? Does he get overtired? Is he subjecting himself to a potential injury? You want to keep your team as healthy as possible throughout this run. You just got to take care of business against an overmatched team, which I would argue the Wizards are.
All right, Bryan, before I let you go, and I appreciate you always jumping in again, Bryan Toporek joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. I'm curious to know where we stand right now with the league going forward, because you've heard a lot about the logistics and the money that goes into this stuff for the NBA. Now, the hope is that the NBA, it'll be quote unquote back to normal next year. We're getting more and more fans back in the building. The NBA will be on basically their original schedule next year. But really, what is the state of the league? I know Adam Silver wants to talk about the play-in tournament, wants to do again, a mid-season tournament now. We had a muted all-star game this year. Obviously, the league just did everything they could to kind of recoup as much money as they could to cover expenses. So what is the state of the league after this postseason moving forward?
Yeah, I bet if you asked Adam Silver, did he expect to have 50% capacity at most arenas by the start of the playoffs, 6 months ago or when the season started, he would have said, only in my wildest dreams. So I think, honestly, given the state of how quickly vaccination has improved, just the world, or at least the country, things are probably better than the NBA would have anticipated. Now, they agreed already on, the salary cap's going to increase by at least a certain amount, and no more than a certain amount. It's at least 3%, no more than 10%. I'm guessing it'll be on the 3%, probably right around there for next season. There's talk of like, oh, okay, this play-in tournament, should we reduce regular season games because of it? And Adam Silver said, look, we're in the business of generating revenue. So 82 games produces more revenue than 72. I think we're going back to an 82-game season next year. It sounds like you're right. He does want to start kind of right in where they usually do, somewhere in mid to late October. The league's broadcast partners have said it behooves the league to finish the finals by the end of June. So it seems like that's what they want to do. We're seeing with the NFL, some teams have already announced they're going back to full capacity next year. I think if knock on wood, assuming things continue progressing with the COVID pandemic as they have over the past few months, hopefully the NBA can follow suit, and hopefully it will be safe to do so once the 21-22 season tips off. I mean, we'll see. I think they're going to be aggressive, trying to make up the revenue that they lost over the past year or two. So would it surprise me to see a midseason tournament sponsored by State Farm, to make an extra couple $1 million? No, absolutely not. Are they going to sell more court ads or jersey ads? NBA Top Shot, they might pump more money into, they're going to explore every possible avenue to recoup however much money they lost over the past year. But I think overall, especially given how great the playoffs were, like that was the best opening weekend of the playoffs that I can remember. I mean, in at least like 10 years. So I think the league should be feeling pretty good about where things stand, especially, if you look back to the bubble. Could we even pull off a regular season safely? And when, early in the season when we had massive outbreaks on teams, most of the league is vaccinated by this point. So I think things are looking up for sure.
He's Bryan Toporek. Check out the NBA podcast. Follow Bryan on Twitter at @Toporek. Check out his work also over at Forbes Sports. And as all guests, he appeared right here on the Boardwalk kind of hotline. Bryan, we survived the early onslaught of technical issues, but we survived and we got through the segment. I appreciate you jumping on as always, and we'll talk soon.
Of course, man. Happy to come on anytime.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, we will check in with all of you guys listening out there. Text board is 609-403-0973. We're also live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. We'll get to your comments as well. Just to let you know, anyone who left a comment before the last 20 minutes, I lost your comment. So because of the technical issue we had a little earlier. So I can only get to the comments that came in for the last 20 minutes. So, but we'll get to all of them that came in as well right here on 97.3 ESPN FM, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. And of course, the app is powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City.
It's Sixers playoff basketball tomorrow on 97.3 ESPN with the voice of the 76ers, Tom McInnes, calling all the exciting Sixers playoff action.
Harris has got it all fucking here in this one. Timeout Washington.
It's Sixers Wizards Game 2 tomorrow. Coverage begins at 7 p.m. Philadelphia 76ers playoff basketball on your radio home of the Sixers in South Jersey. 97.3 ESPN FM.
Attention, New Jersey. Matt Blatt Nissan needs to replenish their pre-owned inventory. They will buy your vehicle for cash today. You heard right. Matt Blatt Nissan will buy your current vehicle for cash or trade it for top dollar and put zero down payment, pay 0% interest, and get $2,500 off MSRP on every 2021 Nissan Murano in stock.
Oh, yeah, it's on at Matt Blatt Nissan.
All new loaded SV model 2021 Nissan Rogue. Lease just $239 per month with zero security deposit. Plus our fast track checkout. Bring any vehicle and Matt Blatt Nissan will buy it for cash or pay top dollar for any trade in Egg Harbor Township next to Home Depot or online at mattblattnissan.com. David Beckley will be refinanced into new vehicle. With qualifications exist. Not all will qualify. 0% APR financing based on 1667 2000 borrowed. Offers can be combined. Murano VIN MC 101371. Rogue VIN MW 011224. 36 month 10,000 miles for your lease. Lease selling price $28,590. Call 877-289-66ML or go to mattblattnissan.com for complete details. Offer ends 5/31/21. It's on at Matt Blatt Nissan on the Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township.
Start with everyone with a brand new puppy they cannot leave home alone. And there he is now, disemboweling a sofa. Now narrow it to the puppy parents who need to get their prescriptions refilled today. For you, there's Walgreens same-day prescription delivery. Medication sent right to your door from the local Walgreens you already know and trust. So you can spend all day at home teaching your new puppy some manners. Elroy, roll over. Or just sit there and tilt your head. Aw. To join, text JOIN-RX to 21525.
Home is where the heart is. And with a $236 million Powerball jackpot win, home could look a lot different than it does now. With all those millions, a Cape May mansion could be yours. So take a chance on Powerball. Anything can happen in Jersey.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here, wrapping up Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. As always, we get to some of your guys' comments before we get out of here each and every night. As I mentioned a little bit before we hit the break, I did lose some of the comments I wanted to get to earlier on the YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter feed. So some of the comments you guys left that would have been great conversational points, completely lost those comments. So nothing I can do about that. Technology, the blessing and the curse, as I always say. But I'm going to get to one text and one YouTube. So go to text board 609-403-0973. On YouTube, we'll get to first. Texter. I'm just going to call you EC because I'm not even fully sure what your username really means. But you say, stars put role players in a position to shine, and they're here and there, but ultimately the superstars put you in a position to win. It's yes and no, because I've seen many games where star players go for huge nights and the team doesn't win. And I've seen games where star players have good nights and their team wins. So it's a little bit of a catch-22. You need the superstar to win a championship, but you need the players around them to step up as well. And I think that we don't always value the supporting cast around these guys. And if you had to ask me, who do I trust more? Do I trust Joe Harris or Danny Green? I trust Danny Green. DeAndre Jordan or Dwight Howard? I trust Dwight Howard. So to me, I think that the stars are very important. And yes, you can't win without them, but the supporting cast is just as important. 609-403-0973 is text port. Dan EHT says, Sixers are an unusual team. The transition defense is terrible, but half-court defense is great. They can win a title because inside 3 minutes, opponents aren't going to score. A couple of things there. One, it's not that transition defense is terrible. It's that the entire NBA's transition defense is horrible. You watch an NBA game that's not involved in the Sixers, like tonight, go watch the Lakers-Suns or the Clippers-Mavs games. And you tell me which of those teams has a significantly better transition defense than the Sixers. Transition defense in the NBA today is borderline impossible because these athletes are so explosive, they're so fast, they're so dynamic, it's hard to get back there. The Sixers' half-court defense is great, though, and I agree with you on that. And other teams are going to struggle against them in those half-court defenses. When the game slows down, which they ultimately do, the Sixers do have a decisive advantage against a lot of teams. The question is how those teams adjust to the Sixers defense is going to make or break the Sixers run. All right, Josh Hennig, this has been Game Night. I'll catch you guys tomorrow right here on 97.3 ESPN.
Wake up weekday mornings from 6 to 10 with Keyshawn, J. Will, and Zubin on 97.3 ESPN.
We're back on Wednesday. We've got the latest on the Aaron Rodgers news, and our next Market Madness features one of the most well-liked athletes against one of the most hated. Keyshawn, J. Will, and Zubin, Wednesday morning on ESPN Radio.
Keyshawn, J. Will, and Zubin, weekday mornings at 6 on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.